Hello YouTube and welcome to the video. I'm going to share with you some knowledge about the protected passed pawn, a strategical aspect of chess, one of many, which I'm sure many of you know, but how do you convert it and why is it so strong? And yeah, what are the benefits? And at the end, I will also share with you what you should do in case of facing this protected passed pawn and how to try and play against such a strategical advantage. I'm going to go through my own game in which I lost due to a protected passed pawn, unfortunately, but very instructive. Then we're going to go through a specific opening in which a protected passed pawn arises rather quickly, and I will show you why it is so strong. And then lastly, we're going to go through a tactic of a certain Magnus Carlsen who uses this protected passed pawn to convert a winning endgame. Alright, the game at hand is from a tournament in 2012. I was the black and I played against a 2000 rated FIDE player and I was around the same strength as well. So the opening doesn't really that matter too much because this is not the reason I'm making this video. It is a Maroczy position, an accelerated dragon, the Maroczy bind. White has a nice space advantage. Black is trying to get into an endgame of bishop against knight. So I remember during this game, my goal was to get into this position of this knight, or that knight for the matter, against the bishop. So I'm trying to trade down into an endgame, trading the queens here. White is just grabbing the space. And this is the moment I wanted to take some time to explain what happened here. I played g5, thinking I'm blockading these pawns on light squares, so therefore this bishop is bad, my knight will be good. I'm creating an outpost on e5, and yeah, I will claim an advantage in the opening based on that evaluation. And that in itself is correct. The problem is that the evaluation, it's like a balanced dynamical situation, because what happens here, after white took, pawn takes and goes h5, we see exactly this protected passed pawn at the edge of the board. And this is a huge asset that white has, which sort of balances the position compared to this nice square on e5 and these, I wouldn't say weak pawns, but these are targets. So black has a nice square, has some targets, but white has this protected passed pawn, and therefore the game is still within the balance. And what I should do here is try to keep the pieces on the board and put pressure on these pawns, right? But the more I trade, the easier it is for white to defend these weak pawns, and the stronger this pawn gets. Because for example, I'll get back to this later, but just know that this pawn restricts black a lot. The king needs to stay in this box in case of a king and pawn endgame. Knight is not very long ranged. So if I would try to go against queenside play, I need to be aware of the potential push down to the h8 square and queening. And this is all very restrictive on my end. The more and more pieces are getting traded. Oblivious to all of this, look what happens. Trade, 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 b4, knight c4, trade. And we get into this endgame, and I'm still thinking, okay, I'll put my knight on e5, I will have pressure there, and then I just push the pawn, and yeah, let's see how the game continues. The problem here is that black is already walking a super thin line of keeping the game in balance. It's very easy for black to mess this up, and white is just simply going to improve. They're going to activate their king, they're going to push on the queen side, and eventually my position will collapse, which is exactly what happens. With super precise play, black can hold the draw. But we're no engines, we're humans. Over the board chess, you get low on time during the endgame and mistakes are just bound to happen. I mean, I'm bringing my king to the center, they do the same. Knight g8, knight h6. And here we see a sad realization, and here I was really starting to worry because, okay, I'm blockading this pawn, and normally the knight is a great blockader of this of a passed pawn, but it's on h6. It really has no scope, it's super passive. White defends the pawn very easily, but the bishop also attacks the queen side at the same time. And after some nice moves by white, who's pushing the pawn, I go b6, and the position is actually already completely lost here, believe it or not. You can see the evaluation also up there change. There were moments in which there was some slight inaccuracies, but the general concept stays always the same, in which it seems so obvious that hey, you made a blunder, now you're losing. But if black only has very few moves that hold the position in balance, at some point you're going to make the mistake. And unfortunately, this is what happens here. And notice how white is not in a rush to take there in order to give up the pawn. It would have been possible, but yeah, due to the restricting factor of this protected passed pawn and the need for black to keep tabs on it, white doesn't need to rush to take this one and allow knight g4. Just goes king f3, and we play out a few moves. I go king d4, they take, and knight check, king g6, and after this pushes, it's just resignable. One of these pawns promotes, and I can do anything to stop it. So yeah, this taught me it's like a very important lesson, right? If we go back to the specific moment, let's see here. Never was I aware of the situation that I was helping white with this protected passed pawn, which actually in the end led to my loss. All right, let's go through a different game, an opening. Actually, this is some theoretical line in which I'll play the main moves, but eventually, of course, we need to make a little bit of an inaccuracy with black here in order to get to a position which we have the protected passed pawn, which would be knight e5. And you can also see the evaluation drop. I mean, don't focus on it too much because it's computer chess and humans are not computers. But it's interesting to note that this move is bad, because after takes, we reach specifically this position in which the d pawn is a protected passed pawn, something that black should never allow. On top of that, you're also blocking in your bishop, so knight e5 is not a great move. But why is it so bad? All right, let's have a look at the same position without pieces. You can see now that we have the same structure but no pieces, simple king and pawn endgame. This pawn, if we draw the square, that means that this black king never is able to get to this side of the board. Never, because the second the king steps on the 4th rank, doesn't matter where, the pawn just gets promoted. So that's very restrictive for black. Another restricting move that white has here is a5 and blockading the queen side completely and still having tempos with b3 in case of zugzwang, and the white king just walks to c4, and it's just a hopeless position. And as you can see by the evaluation as well, this is just not great at all. If we add rooks to the same position, the evaluation starts to change. I mean, all rook endgames are drawn is kind of a saying. White still has the advantage, and practically speaking, white is the one to put pressure. Still, thanks to this protected passed pawn and the potential to maybe attack c5 and get active and improve. And this is a very important theme, that because you have a protected passed pawn, it means that you are able to improve and activate your pieces and start to push forward, while the opponent is always has to always take into consideration the fact of this pawn just making a beeline and running, which makes it harder for them to simply activate their pieces more efficiently. And for example, if f5, it's important to play f3 and not allow this defense of the protected passed pawn to be traded off. How to convert this and how to play these positions is a whole different topic, but I hope I gave you some guidelines in which you could implement in your own games. Let's have a look at this position in which Magnus Carlsen uses a protected passed pawn to convert his great position already. I mean, it's quite clear that black is pressing here with more space, active pieces, a more active king, and white is in a world of trouble. You can see the evaluation here. It's winning, but why is it winning? Well, bishop d5, trading off this active piece. But what do you do after a trade? Well, you don't take back, because that leads to an immediate draw, but you do go the in-between check with d3. King goes to d2, and after king d5, the protected passed pawn on d3 is super restricting. Look how close it is to the edge of the board. So this little square is almost where the white king needs to stay into. And in the meantime, the black rook will just swing over and start to press these pawns. We can play on a couple moves, but we'll see how futile it is. King goes to e3. Rook g6, attacking this pawn. White tries a check. And it's never too late to blunder. So king c6 or d6 would run into a skewer on the 6th rank. So clearly Carlsen went king e6, and after king e4, check. King has to go to f3. And here another check. King goes to e3 and rook f1. White resigns. There's nothing they can do. There's one check on a6, but after king f5, not much to do. You could want to attack c4 with rook c6 or rook a4, but after a check, it's all over. The king needs to go to d2. If it goes to f3 or f2, it's simply d2, d1. So check here, king here, and you just take this pawn. White can take here. I mean, you can take there. You can go e4. These pawns are just way too strong, and the position is completely over. What I would hope for you to take out of this video as the side with the protected pass pawn is that the more pieces get traded, the stronger it gets due to the restrictive nature that it has on your opponent. So you can improve and push forward and keep pressuring your opponent and improving your position. This is key. You don't need to rush to push the pawn up the board. And for the defending side, what is important is to keep the position dynamically open, which means keep the pieces on the board. Because as you've seen, in the endgame, the protected pass pawn only gets stronger. So try to keep pieces on the board, try to complicate, create certain ideas in which you have pieces to play with, because you are much more restricted due to the fact that this guy is close to promoting. So thanks so much for watching and have a great day.